We shall be discussing an equally important live and critical topic, which is about the design of an appropriate, simplified tax system for those operating in the informal economy. In the meantime, Mokshada has also joined me on stage.
Thank you, Krishnan. We are gathered here to explore an issue that not only affects the livelihoods of millions, but has also significant implications for tax administration and economic development. The informal sector plays a vital role in many countries, such as providing jobs and income for a substantial portion of the population. However, individuals and business operating in space often face significant barriers when it comes to formalizing their operations and complying with their tax obligations. Ladies and gentlemen, the moderator for this session is Mr. Hassan Zarir, Commissioner General, Maldives Inland Revenue Authority. He played a crucial role in establishing Maldives Inland Revenue and modernizing the tax system in the Maldives by providing technical expertise and leadership in formulating tax legislation and strategic policies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome our moderator, Mr. Hassan. Our panelists for this fifth session are Professor Dr. Victor van Comer, our second panelist is Mr. Kabir Abba, and our third panelist, Mr. Saman Shanta. We now leave the floor to Mr. Hassan. Thank you.
Keep this. Too short. Yeah, this keep. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. In this session, we have an esteemed member of panelists who have dedicated the whole career to for the improvement of tax systems. I'm really honored to have these esteemed panelists in this session. The topic for this session is informal sector taxation through a simplified tax system. The informal economy plays a crucial role in many countries, contributing significantly to job markets and business activities. However, it often operates outside the formal tax system, posing major challenges for revenue administrations, from revenue losses to creating an uneven playing field between formal and informal businesses. So I wonder, why do so many choose to stay informal? The various reasons include complicated tax legislations, limited access to tax information, difficult filing process, and poor relationship with the tax authorities. For many small businesses, complying with tax obligations seems too burdensome. Simplified tax regimes offer a potential solution for this challenging issue. By reducing complexity and making it easier for individuals and businesses to comply, tax authorities can encourage formalization to increase revenue and foster trust with the taxpayers. In today's session, we'll explore how the informal sector operates, the challenges experienced by the tax authorities, and the many approaches taken to address business operating in the informal sector. First, I would like to introduce our panelist, Professor Dr. Victor. I don't think we need to introduce Dr. Victor to the tax community, but as a formality, I'll just try to briefly give a brief introduction of Dr. Victor. Professor Dr. Victor Nkuma, Director of Capacity Building and Tailored Services at the International Bureau of Fiscal Documentation and a member of its executive board since 2008. He joined IBFT in the year 2000 after working in tax and customs management at the Dutch Ministry of Finance, where he led the Fiscal Intelligence and Investigation Division. Dr. Victor holds a master's and a PhD in tax law from the University of Leiden and was a professor of tax policy at Utrecht University from 2008 to 2022. He currently teaches at Enrolled Business University and has authored several publications, including the widely translated Handbook on Tax Administration. The second panelist with us is Mr. Kabir Abba, the Coordinating Director of the Emerging Tax Group at Nigeria's Federal Inland Revenue Service. Appointed in March 2023, he led the non-oil tax collection strategy, overseeing 6 directorates with 6,000 plus employees and 200 tax offices. He also provided technical oversight on tax legislations to the FIR's board and executive chairman. Mr. Kabir previously served as group lead for general tax operations and director of the medium taxpayer department. He is an alumnus of the Harvard Kennedy School and is pursuing a PhD in taxation at Annan University, Nigeria, and he is a member of several professional bodies, including Annan, CITN, and ACCSA. Our third panelist is Mr. Saman Santha, the Deputy Commissioner General for Tax Policy, International Affairs, and Legal at the Inland Revenue Department of Sri Lanka, where he has served since 1993. He holds a BSc in Public Administration, a Master of Arts in Economics, an MBA in Taxation, and several professional qualifications, including being a certified business accountant and a member of the Institute of Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka. Without any further delay, I'd like to invite Professor Dr. Victor for sharing his insights. Many people often associate the informal sector primarily with the small taxpayers on street vendors. But this view is far too narrow, I believe. The informal sector encompasses a wide range of activities that often go unnoticed but play a significant role in the economy. Professor Dr. Victor, could you please help us better understand a broader scope of the informal sector, both from the academic standpoint and through practical examples? Dr. Victor.
Good morning to all of you. Yes, I will try to explain something about the informal economy. And when we talk about informal economy, we always think it is outside of ourselves. I'd like almost to ask you a question. Who is engaging at a weekly basis with the informal economy here? No one? I see some honest person. Me as well. as well. To tell you there's someone cleaning the house, you recognize that. She wants to be paid in cash. There's someone ironing at our place, also paid in cash. I'm not responsible for the tax declaration, but I have the ID that it is part of the informal economy. Dus we see all kinds of services around us. We make sometimes an advantage out of it. Dus the informal economy is not something what is completely hidden. It is visible. And here is just a simple overview, just maybe a kind of theory. But we have to make a difference between certain terminologies. You have a shadow economy, you have an informal economy, you have a kind of black market. Sometimes it is the same, sometimes not. Just think always in collections. And there is also a wider definition now about shadow economy. A wider definition that we say certain things are illegal. Dus when I pay my cleaning lady cash, and I presume she is not paying her taxes, then on itself it is illegal. Because this money earned, and it is maybe small money, will be later layered back in the economy. And based on also uniform definitions, also by the World Bank, by the EU, that is a part of money laundering. And dus behind this informal economy is a whole theory. One of the things we are seeing all the time when we talk about taxation in economy, and we talk also during this conference about tax GDP ratio, that we have already different formulas, different definition what a GDP is. To give you an example of my country, in the calculation of the GDP, the Central Bureau of Statistics thinks that about in car repair, 40% is done without any invoice. In Germany, because the Netherlands is a small country, they think it is 25%. Dus just at the border, it is a 50% difference. No, that's part of the definitions. Dus based on assumptions. I was myself in the past, Mr. Hassan mentioned already, also in charge of investigation, and we got always the question also from members of parliament, how big is the black economy or shadow economy or informal economy? And we always answered that in a few pages, but it was only one sentence, maybe. When we knew it, it was not there. Dus it is always beneath. What I will say several times, every part of the economy, also an informal economy, is organized, heavily organized. To give you an example, sometimes I'm lecturing in Uganda, in Kampala. There you have a huge market, and I think you recognize that also from your own countries, important big markets. And when I come there, I see always an Ovino market, one of the biggest, maybe the biggest in Kampala. You see at the south gate, I see always a very impressive lady sitting there at the entrance of the market with her wares, with her goods. Dus that means that market is organized. It is the best place. Dus that she got the best place every day means that it is organized, maybe she is paying something. Just don't say that this economy is not organized. Informal is maybe not the right word. It is the unknown economy. And as what our chairman of today said, it is not always small taxpayers. There are also bigger taxpayers hidden behind it. When I'm analyzing sometimes a tax base, then we see certain things what is in our systems, also from bigger companies, domestic companies, but there are also activities under the radar, not in the registration system. Now, this is just the definition, what is used, and here the most important word, it is not part of our registration. And I'm talking here openly, I think because that is fair. when I'm working with less developed economies, then I see there's an extreme focus on taxpayers in the system. Yes, they are already in the system, and maybe their tax returns are maybe not complete or maybe not correct, but at least they are in the system. There are a lot of taxpayers outside the system. And if you want to grow your revenue, the first thing is to enlarge your tax base. Bring them to the system. And there are different methods for that. What is also important is that an informal economy is not only related to taxation. Because we see that compliance is not only towards taxation, but also in labor market standards, minimum wages, working hours, protection. All these kind of things are also not in place. When I was working in investigation, we discovered at a certain moment, but it's already a while ago, we call that horizontal fraud. When someone is fraudulous, they are not only cheating the tax system and are extremely compliant in social benefits or healthcare. No, they are across the agencies non-compliant. So if you want to tackle the informal economy, you have to work with other agencies because it is the same target group. Get out of your silo. A lot of things are already mentioned here. I'm not a person to read my own slides, but the last point is relevant. It is always cash-driven, cash economy. It is, if you want to change the informal economy to bring them to your system, you have to formalize that. I'm coming from a country, I make always the resemblance with my country, that we go to a kind of, now not going, we are in the middle of a digital payment process. I pay everything by card. Only my cleaning lady I have to pay in cash. So then I have to go to an ATM. Less and less ATMs are available because cash is almost suspicious. In many countries in Europe, officially we have banknotes of 250 euro, 500 euro, 100 euros. In many countries, you're not seeing them anymore. There's only the 50 euro banknote. When I would have a 250 euro banknote, I can't spend it because shops won't accept it. So that is already a part of the regulation and to make the market more official. This is just a slide is about, because when you are reporting to your CG or your Minister of Finance or maybe even to Parliament, always the question comes, how big is this economy? And I remember also from the past, I see here a lot of colleagues from the UK. There were also to the House of Commons sometimes reported from how big was, of course, the missing revenues in VAT, sometimes was about 15, 17%. And immediately you get questions, of course, from members of parliament, when you can reduce this tax gap only by 2%, then we have the money to finance my school in somewhere in the north of England. Dus it is also a very dangerous process to report about it, because people think, there is the money. Dus you need to have also a plan how to tackle it. And because it is an unknown economy, we have to work on assumptions. But always good when you calculate something is to follow a kind of trend. Make examples. I talked about a market. You can count already at least how many places there are available in the market. You can even count what is the kind of turnover per marketplace. Then you have already an estimation of a kind of revenue of such a place. You can do that with restaurants. That is the easiest part. There's a lot of things what is forbidden in the society is more difficult to calculate. To give you an example, I try always to give examples from my own practice. We were also of course, fighting against narcotics. When we catch, of course, say 500 kilo of heroin, the thing is that we want to estimate, has that an impact on the price in the market? When it was no impact on the market, then we know this 500 kilos was nothing. Because because by the elasticity of a good, you can calculate what is the price in the market, and you can calculate a kind of turnover. Dus there are a lot of methods to calculate a kind of unofficial kind of turnover. Now, what are possibilities? One of the successes in many countries, and you have also examples in Asia, the African continent, it is not always Europe or on the other side of the ocean, is that withholding taxes is relevant. Always tax at the source. And I know in the less developed countries, always when we talk about international tax, to tax at the source is almost as a fundamental right for the less developed economies. Use it also for your informal economy. Introduce presumptive taxation. Presumptive taxation is a simplified kind of taxation. To give you an example, when I go to a restaurant, I can count how many tables there are, how many chairs. Then I think, hey, maybe they are sold out, maybe 20 days a year. For the rest, they are 50% booked. Then I can make already a kind of turnover calculation. And start low. Start with a kind of percentage of a potential revenue. You will see immediately that there will be larger tables and the smaller tables will be gone, because compliance is also related to avoidance. So if you introduce something, you see immediately the effect that people will do things to get out of this formula. That's for me also an evidence that taxpayers are smart. This presumptive taxation is also, when we talk about marketplaces, just maybe a kind of license fee to be there. Can be just a sticker to glue it on where you sell it, very low amount. When you're not there, you are not allowed to be on the market. Very simple, but a market is also related to services, because that is the whole idea about taxation, that we finance public goods. So when you're only collecting taxes on a market, maybe a part of this money you have to use to clean this market. And let's see there, our title, you are of course an expert in local taxation, because the good thing of local taxation, presumptive taxation, is that you can show also how this money is used, because that is strengthening democracy. Exchange of data. I'm not saying exchange of information with other countries immediately, no, but between agencies. Everyone is somewhere in a registration system. Can be healthcare, can be other things in the municipality. Use this kind of data. Don't always try to find your own data. Yesterday I was talking about Pillar 2, that is the top end. It's the same message, make use of the data what is already available. If you can, to reduce the cash economy, reduce the kind of high banknotes, the value. If you stick to a cash economy, another example, my neighboring country is Germany. Germany is addicted to cash money. Dus in many restaurants I have to pay in cash. The rest of Europe, it is insane. It is not so strange that also the kind of informal or black economy is in Germany considerably higher than in other countries. And I've even seen it, I've learned it from someone else, that when Germans are buying maybe a microwave, they can pay there by cash, by card. They will go outside, go to the ATM to have the cash, and then they will pay for it. Sorry, that is a kind of addiction to cash. You have to follow consumption behavior. That is of course very important, because finally individuals are doing something with their money. They consume, they save, that kind of things. Dus always to understand what are consumption patterns. Formalize the economy, give permits, licenses, to bring them in your system. First in the system, like in the taxpayers administration process model, registration comes first, then the filing, and the payment is the last part. Social benefits to your tax identification number. That's when you want to have certain things subsidized, or even during the COVID period, we are helping our citizens. When you have not a tax identification number, maybe you are not allowed to get this benefit, again, to bring people in the system. More for the richer, say, persons, individuals in the informal economy, you have to make a kind of equity or net worth reconciliation. That means, what are the possessions, the assets they have this year compared with next year? And what is the differences in savings, maybe a house, maybe they have added a swimming pool, and then you will think where this money came from. Very valuable part, of course, to tackle this shadow or informal economy. Last thing is grouping registrations. People are not always individuals. They act in groups. They act as families. There's not only the individual, because that is an inheritance of our income tax system, but group them. You say, I can go forever. This is one almost of my last slides. That 2 minutes, 2 minutes is long before a final execution. That is. What I do here is that, again, the income tax system was created in the 19th century. The first one who created it was our English friends, our British friends, to finance the war against Napoleon, and then it was abolished later. Later it came back in Europe. But it is based on the concept of income, what you earn in 1 year time. A very difficult concept. It's not so easy, the concept of income. Or it is in corporate or in the individual, what you earn, what are the sources of income. But you can also do it reverse. You have to think from, in a lifetime of an individual, what he or she is doing. And then you see certain life events. Family. When you are a family person, when you're a parent, I'm also a parent, then you know how costly it is to have a family. Dus birth is important, but also death in a family, funerals, that kind of things are costly. When I walk around in certain countries, in Africa, India, we have also Sri Lanka here, then I see that marriages, people spend a lot of money on marriages. That is, and then I'm always thinking when I'm at the hotel at a marriage, and then I think, where is this money coming from? Dus you can follow this kind of life events. Health, when people have to go to a hospital. The insurance system in the less developing countries is not the equal like in Europe. Where people are financed it from. When grandmother has to go to the hospital, what is the source of income? And people are moving to another house. All the time, this kind of life events is what we have to keep in mind when we're organizing a tax system. There's maybe to abandon a little bit the year-to-year income, because sometimes in a couple of years nothing is changing. Dus it is following a kind of change process. And that you see already by this simple picture, which kind of agencies are relevant for the exchange of information. And again, I was mentioning it yesterday as well, I do it with every topic, is how to consume an elephant. That's always bit by bit. And I want to keep it here, because otherwise I will talk too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for the enlightening presentation on the informal sector. The insights have certainly broadened our understanding on informal sector. And we have heard from the professor that currently we are seeing a lot of creative arrangements from the professionals in making it seeing informal, although they may not be informal, right? So now I'd like to turn to Mr. Kabir Abba, who has significant hands-on experience in this area. Mr. Abba, throughout your career, you have worked directly with the informal sector in various capacities. Could you share with us some of the key challenges and opportunities you have encountered while engaging with this sector? Also, how do you view its contribution to the broader economy? And what strategies have you found effective in addressing its unique characteristics? Stop.
The leadership of CATA, distinguished participants, I want to thank you for the opportunity given to me to share Nigeria's experience when it comes to the informal, or what they refer to as the shadow economy. Thank you, Professor. You've given an overview, and I want to give you the Nigeria's experience now. Nigeria is a country with a population of over 230 million persons. We have 36 states in the Federation and 1 Federal Capital Territory, and this is a typical of what you see in most of the major towns in Nigeria as we speak. So there was the IMF report recently that stated 65% of the economic activities that happen in Nigeria are accounted for by the informal sector. This was a report recently published by the IMF. The typical informal sector in Nigeria are those people in businesses or workers that are not really registered for tax purposes. And in some cases, people hide under that shadow to say they are informal, but they're into real active businesses. And in some cases, you can even find some to be registered. It's just that they don't come up, with their legal obligations to do their tax dealings. And in Nigeria, the informal sector is a critical backbone of its economic landscape because it contributes significantly to employment and about close to 60% of the GDP, according to Nigeria's Bureau of Statistics. What am I saying? The informal sector in Nigeria is very huge because with a growing population in Nigeria and less opportunities in the formal sector, that is what drives most people to operate under the informal, even though they are not really informal as it is. The informal sector in Nigeria also had its own advantages because it serves as a social safety net for most of the people there, because that is where they make their income. Despite its large volume, it's still not very productive because you have so many people, but the productivity within the informal sector, it is very, very low and small. And that is why we need this approach to find a way around it, to either make them formal or to understand those that are really, really informal so that you get to treat them the way they should be treated. This is another small statistics that was given because about 24% are into retail and general trade, which accounts for most of the informal sector. And this informal sector, as it is, for a majority of them, make less than 500,000 naira monthly in terms of profits. We have other informal sectors, but the prominent amongst are the retail and the general. We have people into plumbing. We have people with professional services, but still, operate under that window. The unfortunate thing about the Nigeria's experience is that when you say the informal sector, you think they don't pay any form of taxes, but they do. A recent survey portrays that more than 80% of any business operating under the informal sector has paid one form of tax or the other, but this is not accounted for. And that is the reason why the tax to GDP ratio in Nigeria just struggled and managed to reach a 10%, the tax to GDP just of recent. Going by the volume of activities that are going on that are unreported, most of these businesses suffer from the hands of touts. Because for the informal sector operators, they pay one form of tax or the other on daily basis or even on weekly basis, eroding their capital, which they don't even have access to. Yeah. So the informal sector economy in Nigeria stands the risk of multiple taxation, going from fees, market levies, local government councils, and all that. And at the same time, it is not being reported. So there are these issues of problems about multiple taxation. And because of the volume, like I stated earlier, that is the reason why it's not been reported. Nigeria has taken certain steps, at least to find a way to at least reduce the activities of this informal sector and to fish out those that are really not informal, so to say. In Nigeria, we have a threshold for businesses that operate below 25 million naira. Those are classified as informal, and they are not expected to pay any form of taxes to the government. As I speak, we have the Nigerian tax bill currently at our National Assembly waiting to be passed into law, and this threshold has now been is proposed to be increased to 50 million naira, within which if you operate below, you will not pay any form of taxes. So by that, if it gets into, become a law, the tax system in Nigeria will be more progressive. You get to identify those that are really struggling. And there's another issue that faces Nigeria, especially the informal sector. We don't have a unique identifier to get these taxpayers, to get to categorize them. For a lot of us there, some people have what they call the TIN, the Taxpayers Identification Number, some the BVN, and don't forget, the 36 states and the FCT we have in Nigeria all have their own individual revenue services. So we don't really have, we don't really have it in one. So for a lot of them, we don't have a unique identifier, which the National Tax Bill in the National Assembly is trying to now do, to bring up what you can singly identify a person or a business for tax purposes. Our tax laws and systems has been very, very complex, in the past years. So one of the proposals also is to simplify the processes of registration and how you even get to pay these taxes, because it was so cumbersome in the past. We have now simplified it. Another good thing is that we have now streamlined the multiple of taxes that we have in the country. We want to put them all together to consolidate so they have one or two only, to pay. Nigeria, as unique as it is, has over 300 languages in the country. So you can imagine how difficult it is when it comes to enlightenment and awareness, on the part of these taxpayers. But also reach a really advanced stage in that regard, also trying to localize and simplify it in simple terms to the common man to understand what his obligations are when it comes to the payment of taxes. Well, there are some states in the country that have adopted what is called the presumptive income tax regime in their respective states, because this seems to be the only way to get these people that make so much profit to come to the tax net and pay. There is the famous Alaba market in Nigeria's commercial capital, Lagos. That particular market has a lot of trade unions and deals in billions of naira transactions, but they're still classified as informal because they don't really have this unique identifier, and they are not, they don't have the unique identifier, and they're still referred to as informal. So, in that kind of situation, to borrow from Professor Victor, is to do a presumptive regime to kind of size them up and see how you can cluster them, what we call the blockchain management, to see how you can uniquely identify them for tax purposes, especially those that are, operating under the shadow as an informal economy. So the tax bill is there with the National Assembly, and some of the legislations will also include what I will refer to as a design for the informal sector, where we'll design the informal sector, review the presumptive tax regime, and reasonable exemption threshold on the part of these taxpayers. So, in conclusion, let me not bore you. In conclusion, the informal sector exists, but it is not as being portrayed as all of them are below, the taxable amounts of money. They do make a lot of money there. We are leveraging on technology and data, like my colleague presented yesterday on the automatic exchange on information. You can see a particular taxpayer operating on the informal economy but has millions and billions of nairas in turnover and not paying some form of taxes. We have such informations, but we are not digitalizing the system. We want to bring out a legislation because the major problem is that we don't have backings of the law. And we all know that taxation has to do with the law. And I believe with all this that we have put in place, which is still work in progress, and of course, with some contributions and some suggestions from you, we should be able to curb this menace and really bring out those people that seem to be insignificant or seem to be hiding for them to come and pay, their taxes. Nigeria's tax system has been simplified in terms of registration, filing, payment, refund, receipting, clearances, and all that is so simplified. So by this, we're simplifying revenue collection as well as maximizing, to get an optimal collections from that sector. On this note, I want to rest my presentation. This is Nigeria's experience when it comes to the informal or shadow economy as it is referred to. Thank you very much and good afternoon to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kabir, for your valuable insights and sharing your experience in navigating the informal sector. Building on this, I now would like to invite Mr. Samansanta to offer his perspective. The informal sector is not always limited to small businesses as we have been discussing today. It can also extend into professionals we greatly consider formal, such as doctors and lawyers. In Sri Lanka, there are cases where professionals engage in transactions that could lead to tax avoidance, resembling practices common in the informal sector. Mrs. Santa, could you share some examples from your experience and explain how such dynamics play out in Sri Lanka? Santa.
Good afternoon, everybody, because now is 12 past. So, the topic is informal sector taxation through simplified tax system. Right? There is no common definition for the informal sector. However, we can identify the informal sector as diversified set of economic activities, enterprises, jobs, and markets that are not regulated or protected. Now, a group of production units in the economy that are not captured by formal arrangement. The informal sector comprises workers, construction workers, professionals in Sri Lanka, private medical doctors, lawyers, tuition masters also, and private businesses, self-employers and employees. In Sri Lanka, actually, before we address and before we look into the informal sector, we have to identify who are in the informal sector, where they live, what are the categories of informal sector. Without knowing those details, it is impossible to address the informal sector. Sri Lanka is concerned, when we go to the employment category, we can find out the number of employees in total formal and informal sector is over 8 million. Out of that, when we go to the category of employees, total employees 4.7 million. Out of that, 2.9 million are in the formal sector informal sector 1.7 million. Employers out of 2008, 208,000, 96,000 in informal sector. When we talk into the own account workers, 2.6 million, out of that 2.4 million in informal sector. Like that contribution, family workers also same. Then when we go to the sector wise, we can identify most employees are working in the non-agricultural sector. This thing is very important to address and collect details from the informal sector for the taxation purposes. We found that out of that 8 million, 5.9 million were in the non-agricultural sector. The agricultural sector, 2.08 million. So we can see most of the informal sector engages in the agricultural sector. So this is the informal sector in Sri Lanka. We can find out play important role, contribute to economic growth, absorbing employment and providing income, safety net for the millions of people. The government no need to provide employees because they themselves work to the country. But it is very difficult to identify who are them. In Sri Lanka, we found that we have three-wheelers, 1.4 million. They are self-employed. In India also, I know Triso taxi drivers. In Thailand, tuk-tuk taxi drivers also there. Likewise, in Sri Lanka, 1.4 million. After they leave from the school, what they do is they buy three-wheeler or they acquire three-wheeler under the leasing. Then they earn income. The government no need to worry about that, providing them employment. Likewise, informal activities are in Sri Lanka, like your countries, small scale, unregistered and not covered by regulations, low productivity, low rate of savings and investment, and limited capital accumulation. Every time they are in same position because no investment, no accumulated capital, business is not developing. Then this is a very important. How Sri Lanka address and take measures to identify informal sector and catch them into the tax net. We attempt to introduce a progressive tax structure in 2018. That is very important. Next is, we have identified 14 untaxed sectors. I will show you. Last year, government of Sri Lanka issued a Gazette notification. According to that Gazette notification, it is compulsory to register these 14 category of people and get the taxpayer identification number with effect from 1st June 2023. Please look at these 14 categories. Practitioners registered with the Sri Lanka Medical Council and chartered accountant certified management accountant, engineers, workers in banking association, like that 14 categories here. We have identified even some doctors when they served in the government or private institution, the pay tax is deducted by the employer and sent to the IRD of Sri Lanka. But they do private practices. They do private practices. We are not in a position to catch them. So some doctors and engineers not work in government or private sector, they privately do their profession. So we are not in a position to identify them and tax them. So according to this Gazette notification, it is compulsory to take a taxpayer identification number. Without taxpayer identification number, they can't do the business. Like that, if they are liable to pay tax, they have to pay tax by submitting the tax return. In addition to that, from 1st January 2024, yes, from January 2025, any individual who does not belong to above category, who is at the age of 18 years or more as at December 31st, 2023, or who attains the age of 18 years on or after January 1st, 2024, after attaining the age of 18 years, it is compulsory to take the taxpayer identification number. We found that 17.5 million in Sri Lanka who under this category, over 18 years old. So it is not an easy task to give taxpayer identification number them. Now we registered over 1 lakhs per day, because our system is not capable to register more people in one day. The bulk registration we do, over 100,000 tax TIN numbers we can give. Calculate how many days we want to register all persons who are eligible under this category. Even giving a registration number is not useful. If we register taxpayer, compliance rate is below 20 or 10%, that is, this effect is useless. So we have, before register the taxpayer, we have to correctly identify correct name, correct business address, correct private address, and telephone numbers or social media numbers. We can connect with the taxpayer, and email addresses. Everything we have to collect and check whether the details are accurate. Then after we register and give the TIN number. From next year, when a person went to register their motor vehicle or renew their motor vehicle license, it is compulsory to provide taxpayer identification number to the motor vehicle register. Not only that, when person buy a land or transfer the land, when they register their land or building in the land registry department, it is compulsory to provide the taxpayer identification number. Like that, it is compulsory. When the person open a bank account, especially current account, he or she should provide the taxpayer identification number. Because these things we can easily identify who are the person liable to tax. You know, if the person buy motor vehicle, if the person buy land, if the person open current account, the current account is opening for the business purposes. We can identify those person. Now this is also very important. We issued another gazette notification. According to this gazette notification, it is compulsory to share information with the Inland Department. All banks, all financial institutions, stock exchange, motor vehicle department, land register department, all details relating to the person should share with the Inland Revenue Department on web-based platform. Those details also receive the department. In addition to that, we conducted several awareness programs last year and this year to aware our taxpayer. We have a compliance enhanced model with the assistance of the IMF, and we introduced withholding tax for professional services providing individually, and we have a cash transaction restriction. If the value of one transaction exceeds rupees 500,000, that transaction should be done through credit card, debit card, or check payment or bank draft. If they use cash, we do not allow that expenses for the income tax purpose when calculating the taxable income. In addition to that, we have planned to issue privileges card for taxpayers. In addition, this is very important. From this year, from October this month, we planned and issued the Simplified Tax Return. According to this return, one-page tax return, when taxpayer put their tax identification number, all details related to taxpayer pop up. Especially this is related to the person has employment income, primary employment. If that person has two employment income, not relevant this. One employment income, interest income, and who has a nil return. When the taxpayer put in their PIN number, all details, salaries, what is the amount deducted from the salaries, interest income, what is the withholding tax amount deducted by the bank, all details appeared here. No need to put manually. If the one figure is wrong, taxpayer can also put correct amount. Like that, because of the time, right. Then we have facing several challenges. So however we overcome those challenges, we did our duty. How is tax informal sector? As I informed earlier, collected tax as presumptive tax, and separate progressive tax system, separate simplified tax return, regulate the informal sector through incentivized program, introduce to non-cash system. All these measures we have taken to address the informal sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you. working. Thank you, Santa. Your insightful presentation. It seems very interesting, the approaches that you have been following. Since given the limited time, I will throw one question to each of the panelists. First, Dr. Victor, could you please shed some lights on how the informal sector operates in Netherlands?
In every economy, there is an informal sector, also in advanced economies. And it is also related to the previous speakers. It is most of the time, also in the Netherlands, very small business, self-employed entrepreneurs. That's an issue in the Netherlands. That's happening. And what you see as well, because the economy is quite an official economy, a formalized economy, that people, even the self-employed people, aren't doing completely services informally, is not happening. There's a kind of gray area. They say, hey, I can do 25% in cash. Because I'm always seeing when people pay in cash, hey, what is the source? Because I have no cash, or I have to go to an ATM. That's happening, but it is happening as well, for instance, in the construction industry. Not that they always want, but because it is a booming economy, there's a lot of workers coming from other countries, like Polish workers or people from Central Europe. And they are coming just over the week, and then during the weekends they go home. They like to be paid in cash because they will spend it at home. So that means that also the formalized construction firms are sometimes forced to reduce their prices to do also a part in the gray economy. Now, just a few examples. It is existing, and again related to the cash economy. I can give you more examples, but we think that it is about around 10–12% of the economy. And also a lot of illegal things. You know, immigration is a hot issue in Europe. Human trafficking is a big business. And human smugglers earning easily between 8,000 and 10,000 euros per person to bring them to Europe. I see some of you think, why I'm working for a tax administration, but
Thank you, Dr. Victor. Mr. Kabir, in your presentation, you have referred to the informal economy as a critical backbone of the Nigerian economy. You also have highlighted that Nigeria's low tax to GDP ratio is largely due to the size of the informal sector, emphasizing the need to integrate it into the formal economy. Could you please explain us how Nigeria can effectively tax the informal sector?
Thank you very much. You see, for you to integrate the informal sector to become formal, you have to put some kind of threshold for the category of taxpayers to put a benchmark. When you do that, you now simplify the tax codes so that it will be easy for everybody to understand it and to go and pay seamlessly. You must embrace automation. That is about the only way. You must open up payment channels, SD codes, EBMs, and all that. Because the advantage that we have in Nigeria, or that we had, was during the COVID period, it made a lot of people to embrace technology. So it significantly reduced the amount of tax that you use in making your businesses. And when you do a legislation, that also goes a long way to help. In Nigeria, we have the Federal Taxing Authority, and we have the States Internal Revenue Service, which are 36, and the FCT 37. So we're lucky to have a body called the Joint Tax Board that is umbrella for this category of revenue agencies to come together to fashion out ways. So they have harmonized most of these taxes. We're working together, and we're leveraging on data. Because with a touch of a button, if you are registered or not registered, we will be able to know. So there's no hiding place for anybody that doesn't want to actually pay his taxes. By the time you do all that, it will make them to forcefully be integrated into the formal sector, while you now allow those to breathe, like it's a common thing in my country now, allow them to grow and breathe for them to pay their taxes. But for those that are big, they must pay their taxes. So by the time you do that, I had mentioned earlier that if you do a blockchain management system, cluster them together, you should be able to pay, their taxes. And one most important thing, all these unique identifiers, you have to tie it to something that they must use in order to get them. Because if you want to obtain, say, title documents, driver's license, permits, and all that, this identifier must be tied to something. So by that, you have them together. It makes it impossible for anybody to operate without this unique identifier, which will now serve as a way to bring him to the net and tax him appropriately. Most importantly, simplify the system, simplify the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to turn to Mr. Santha. You mentioned that a significant number of taxpayers operate within the informal sector. Could you explain why it is so challenging to tax these businesses and what measures you have taken from Sri Lanka's perspective?
Yes, thank you. What I want to tell you one thing. When we go back to year 2020, 2021 and first half of 2022, Sri Lanka economic, political stability is not so good. So Sri Lanka has declared as a bankrupt country in that period because of ad hoc policy decision taken and COVID-19 pandemic and other political uncertainty in Sri Lanka. But after the 2022, now we are regaining. So as a tax administration, we have to do more work to increase government revenue. Without government revenue, any state can't be survived. So, as a tax administrators, all of us do most important part to our countries. So, we have to rethink again. That is why we have taken several decisions. As I explained you, several law changes, several gazette notification, several measures have taken by the Inland Revenue Department to rebuild our country. I think up to some extent we achieved that target. Now we are given the revenue target 2 trillion in this year. Now we are achieving that. That amount is achieving it is very good picture to the country. As you said, we have to address the informal sector. Normally in our country, large taxpayers compliance rate is over 90%. Upper corporate taxpayers compliance rate is over 80%. And medium taxpayers compliance rate is over 60%. But small taxpayers compliance rate is below 40%. So we have to increase compliance rate and we have to identify who evades taxes. That is why we take most decision to catch them and put it to the tax net. I think we succeeded.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sant. We've now heard from all of our panelists. Thank you, our panelists, for sharing valuable insights on informal sector. Now, I would like to open the floor for questions and comments. If you have
can take maybe a few questions given the time limitations. Over there.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I once again would like to commend the three panelists for that insight, deliberation on the informal sector taxation. What I have seen in common is that in most revenue authorities, you have the legal framework in place that is regulating how informal sectors should pay their taxes. But most of the time, we have the law in place, but when it comes to implementation, it's always a problem. You will see that you have the gap between the law is in place and the compliance on the side of the informal sector also is always a difficulty. I would like them to deliberate on how can revenue authorities bridge that gap to make sure that at least those players in the informal sector are really compliant with what is provided for in the informal sector law. Thank you.
Who would like to take that question? Yeah.
Thank you. I think you start already, and it is not only with the informal economy, but there's always a difference between, I think, the rule-based part of the coin and the implementation at the other side. There's focus not only on the rules, that is just an instrument, but implementation is that there are two things. Sometimes what I said, you have to bring people to your tax base first. Registration is in it. Just to give you an example, my previous speaker mentioned also that in many countries you introduce a threshold. In every tax you see a threshold. But what you see when you monitor a threshold, you see in practice immediately that a lot of taxpayers are just below the threshold. There's a lot of traffic under the threshold. Now, that is one of the things about implementation. You need audit time not to audit your taxpayers above the threshold, but just the category below, because they are hiding. And that is just some practical experience. Then you use still your same rules, but you force them to bring in the system, because normally a curve is just progressive or degressive. But when you get, of course, below a threshold, a lot of taxpayers, that is an indication that something is wrong. And it doesn't matter what kind of tax you introduce, it is always the case. So therefore, you need monitoring time or auditing time for the integrity of your threshold. Here you see a combination of law and implementation, but I can give you much more examples. There's the seat always from two sides. I can give you more examples, but I think due to the time,
We'll take one more. Anyone else would like to try to make brief and short?
Yeah, thank you very much, and that is a very good question. You see, when the informal sector actually became a problem, we didn't really have all these things in place. But for you to ensure implementation, you have to have the infrastructure, because informal sector has been the brain for most of these countries, and as at that time, most of us are not even advanced in terms of technology. But as we speak now, we are almost there now. So implementation will not be difficult, because if you say you want to use some payment channels, probably the point of sales, the codes and all that, and you don't have that infrastructure, what do? You can't actually implement such things. But now that you now have them in place and you are continuously enlightening and educating them, I think it should really go a long way. From the Nigeria's experience, the figures keep on growing day by day, because what we registered last year is usually almost double of what we registered this year. And there's this taxpayer behavior. When he knows that he cannot dodge, he comes voluntarily to come and, to comply. Because what actually makes the informal sector very difficult is that they feel you don't even know where they are. But you have systems now where you can identify them, and you have some means of enforcement, so to say. Even though we know taxation, everybody wants to be customer-centric, we want voluntary compliance and all that. But I think that is the essence of the laws. If you do all the enlightenment, you provide all the infrastructure, the platforms and all that, if they don't, then I think you should begin to set example, especially for those that operate under that shadow. Thank you.
Rather, would you like to add?
Yes. First, we have to identify behavior of the informal sector and behavior of the individuals. As OECD mentioned, psychological behavior, social behavior, business behavior, like that we have to identify behavior of the informal sector and who engage in individual who engage in the informal sector. By identifying that behavior, we have to organize awareness programs. In a school level we can do, in a university level we can do. In addition to that, we can go to the several institutions and we can give a tax knowledge them. By the awareness program, we can enhance their knowledge about the taxation and we can get them into taxation and compliance rate we can increase accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Santa. We'll take one more question.
Thank you very much. My name is Lawrence Hochunyame from Ghana. One of the canons of taxation is economy. That is to suggest that we minimize the cost of collection as much as possible. With the informal sector or the hidden economy, we all know that the cost of collecting taxes in those areas is very high. How do we strike the balance, minimizing the cost of collection taxes from the informal economy as against promoting voluntary compliance among the same set of people? You know, you realize in Ghana, we have some tax types, we call them the tax stamp, the micro businesses. Sometimes you spend a whole day in enforcing compliance in that area, and you can only collect very, very minimal revenue. So how do we strike the balance between minimizing the cost of collection and promoting compliance? Thank you.
Professor, it's good. Please.
Thank you. I think you have seen already what I addressed is I'm really in favor for the informal economy. I'm not talking about the rich taxpayers hiding under the informal economy, but more the small economy to go to simplified taxation, simplified procedures, presumptive taxation. Because what you say is a very relevant aspect. On the moment that compliance costs, but also administrative costs, your costs are high, then it is not a very efficient tax way. But, therefore, an existing income tax system with all the forms and registration is, for me, too complex. And then that is answering also your question. You have to go, even when you not want to introduce a different tax, because that means a different tax law, but you have to find simplified provisions. And a simplified provision is also based on the knowledge and the taxpayer education, what the taxpayer or the potential taxpayer can understand. And we make most of the time, now to give you another example, I was many years also chairman of a knowledge institution for the self-employed entrepreneurs. And one of the things I learned there, that there are a lot of hard workers, self-entrepreneurs, self-employed workers, they have maybe some knowledge in their business, but no understanding about tax. And they can't ask a tax advisor because they have not the money for it. Dus we think sometimes implicitly that there is a kind of understanding. What for us is our bread and butter is not for the average taxpayer. Dus it is about requirements from what a taxpayer in that sector can understand. And I give you already things like license system, to pay just a flat fee have the allowance to do business. That's maybe a starting point. Forget the whole forms in VAT and income tax.
With that, we will end this session. Please give a big round of applause to our esteemed friends. Thank you.
Moderator, distinguished panelists, thank you for your interesting discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, our expert speakers have shared valuable perspective on designing simplified tax procedures and processes so that they are accessible, equitable, and supportive to all the operators. We have also learned today that clarity, ease of use, and transparency are the essential components that will encourage our informal operators to transition to the formal economy.
We shall now proceed with the presentation of the token of appreciation offered by the CATA. And may we now also please call upon on stage Ms. Debbie Locke to do us these honors to present the appreciation token. Debbie. So the first token will be presented to Mr. Hassan Zarir. The next token will be presented to Professor Dr. Victor van Kommer. Next token to our second panelist, Mr. Kabir Abba. And finally, to Mr. Saman Shanta. Please come forward for a group session photo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we break for lunch, we have a small reminder. So anyone who wishes to perform for tonight's CATA night, whether it's a dance item or a song item, and if you feel like sharing your details with us, please do so with our country correspondent, Mrs. Mukta Tufani. You can give her the details, and if ever you want to share any music or you want to share any link, you please provide us to us so that we can do the necessary with the IT logistics. Thank you. So for now, we are going to break for lunch. Enjoy your time. Have some quality time by the seaside, of course, but we are going to resume around 1:45 for the rest of this session. So please enjoy your meal.
Thank you.
Thank you.